We finally made it to the big time, folks. Are you ready? This video is sponsored by Audible. Okay, you know what's going on by now. We said we'd get a Warlord Titan, the biggest Warhammer 40k model ever made, when we hit 1,000 Patreon supporters, and build and paint it on the channel. We hit it, we ordered it, a few weeks later it came, we unboxed it, we forgot the head, someone awesome sent us a head, more on that later, and now, after quite a lot of research, it's time to actually start building this thing. Now, I'm not an expert on building Forge World or Resin stuff really. I've only had a few small bits in the past, so I don't want you to go into this thinking that I know what I'm doing. We're going to be learning together, you and me. Now, because this kit is huge and heavy, it's going to take a few more sophisticated and specialist tools I don't currently have. I found out all about this by reading the Wee Men Warlord Titan assembly blog, which I'll link to in the video description. In it, they cover all of the tools and products that they use to make their Titan, and I'll cover these new things and how to use them, or how definitely not to use them, as we go. So, to get this Titan project off the starting blocks, let's focus on the hand. The Arioch Power Claw. It's got big parts, fiddly parts, moving parts, but it shouldn't take too long to build. So the first job is to remove the huge resin blocks from the casting process. Step in new tool number 1, a razor saw. This one is from Tamiya. I fell in love with these tiny snips after my Giron set broke, and I thought I'd give their saw a try. Oh yes, this cuts so easily. It's incredibly sharp and makes short work of the supports, which is good because this whole project is going to have hundreds of them. As I said, small supports can also be removed with hobby snips. I also shaved the areas where the sawn off knobs were sticking out with my scalpel, and that way it'll minimize the amount of filing I have to do later. I methodically went through all of the parts removing the casting blocks. This little cable array had a resin shim, which is just a thin sheet just to make sure all of the detail is cast, but it came away pretty easily with the cut of a scalpel. Okay, so all the big snippy and cutty bits are out of the way, it's time to file. You definitely should be wearing some kind of dust mask or respirator when you're filing resin. Once I was all masked up, I started filing away at the places where the supports were attached to smooth them off, and also round off any big obvious mold lines. The files I'm using are just regular old nail emery boards, but they're slightly spongy, so they seem to contour to the stuff a bit better than hard files. They're also dirt cheap, which is handy. When I'm doing long hobby projects like this, I love to have something on in the background. I find it keeps me focused and stops me procrastinating in between steps. I've mentioned a few podcasts and audiobooks that I've enjoyed in previous videos, but because Audible have very kindly sponsored this video, I thought I'd go into a bit more detail on why I like it so much and give you a few recommendations if you want to give it a try too. I know it might shock a lot of you to know, but I've never really been a book person. I just never really got into the habit of sitting down and making the time to read when I was younger. I always preferred to spend the time playing games or, painting models. So in 2019, at the height of my not reading guilt, I watched one of Miniac's videos where he was talking about 40k content on Audible, and he had a 30-day free trial, and I thought to myself, well, I might as well give it a go. And since then, I've listened to over 30 audiobooks. That's more than I read in the entirety of my 20s. Obviously, all of our tastes are different, but if you want to give Audible a try, here are a few recommendations of audiobooks I've really enjoyed. So, Dune by Frank Herbert literally always comes up whenever people talk about the influences found in 40k, and it's totally justified. A really engrossing, detailed, and believable sci-fi universe with a captivating story, and it's brilliantly narrated by excellent actors. I mentioned it a few videos back, but Dracula by Bram Stoker was just awesome. The story is so well paced and gripping that you sometimes forget that it's 124 years old. On Penny's recommendation, I also listened to The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Going by the reviews, it seemed to be universally loved, and it was nice to read a mix of mystery, romance, violence, and spooky intrigue woven together so well. If you're totally Warhammer obsessed, there are loads of 40k themed audiobooks too. Let me know in the comments what your favourite Black Library title is, and I'll do my best to check them out. Having an Audible Premium Plus subscription gives you 1 token a month, which you can spend on any audiobook, no matter what it costs to buy in regular money. It gets added to your library, and you can access it forever, even if you pause or cancel your membership one day. Also, if you're just not really enjoying the audiobook, you can easily refund it and swap it for something else. I've done that a couple of times, it's no biggie. Once you remember, there's also tons of free content like serialized shows and podcasts on the platform too. So if that sounds like something you might want to try, follow the link in the video description, start your 30-day free trial and see what you think. If you prefer to type stuff, go to audible.com/midwinterminis, or if you live in the USA, text Midwinter Minis with no spaces to 500500. Thanks Scott for turning me on to Audible, and thanks again to Audible for sponsoring this video and helping support the We're Having Two Babies at Once fund. So at the end of that marathon chop, trim and file session, there was a lot of resin debris on my desk. As I said, this stuff is nasty, so I made sure to vac it all up before I continued. Now it's bath time for the Power Claw. You need to wash resin components because they all have a tiny bit of release agent residue on them. It's a kind of very thin grease that stops the mold sticking to the resin, but it's also really good at stopping paint from sticking to models too. Here's some resin offcuts. This one I cleaned, and this one is straight from the bag. A coat of paint, an hour later, and yeah, the one I didn't clean rubs off pretty noticeably. Cleaning is no big deal though, you just need some warm water with a bit of dish soap mixed in and an old toothbrush. Pretty simple, chuck them all in the water, and one by one give each piece a thorough scrubbing. None of these pieces were that thickly coated with release agent, so it's a pretty simple process. Apparently, if it's still tacky and shiny after doing this, you can use a bit of toothpaste to make your scrubbing a bit more abrasive. In the unboxing video, we did notice a few pieces that were a bit sticky, so when we get to those, we might have to crack out the thymol. So, all pieces scrubbed up nice. I laid them out to double check I actually had all the parts. Should have done that earlier, to be honest. And yep, all present and correct. The fingers come with the basic tips, but also optional claw tips for bonus stabby points, probably. I actually quite like the look of the regular sized ones, so maybe I'll keep the claws for another project, or a Halloween costume or something. Right, let's talk about glue. Your regular plastic cement is no good here, because we're not working with polystyrene-based plastic like regular Warhammer stuff. Instead, I'm going to be using super glue, CA glue, or whatever you want to call it. I'm also going to be using Gorilla Glue, which is what I use to stick pretty much everything on my Start Collecting Deathmatch arena, and that huge project only used about a third of the bottle. This does expand quite a bit as it dries, so it might not be ideal for any areas near details. I've also got some JB Plastic Weld, which is a two-part resin glue which should chemically bond the resin parts together, and this stuff comes really highly recommended from experienced Forge Weld builders. For small stuff that won't be bearing any weight or holding on big armor panels, I just use super glue to fix the bits together, and also repair any parts that had arrived broken or that had accidentally broken in the cleanup phase. It's worth mentioning that in our unboxing video it was quite hard to spot any obvious casting flaws, but taking a closer look on these individual pieces, there are a few issues here and there, but nothing major. A few rough edges, small bubbles in hard to notice places, nothing I'm too concerned about really. I haven't finalised the paint scheme in my head for this thing yet, but I think I'm going to be going along the same lines as the Imperial Knight I painted up last year, so a few bits of battle damage already applied isn't really such a huge issue for me. Also, while I'm definitely going to be painting up the structure of the Titan's body with its armor panels separately, pretty much this whole hand is armor panels, so I'm going to assemble this in two main sections, the Mega Bolter and the rest of the hand, just to keep things simple. Okay, let's try the JB Weld to hold down these armor panels. Oh, hey, that came out a bit gloopier than I was expecting. Oh no. Hang on a second. Okay, so one long soak and a totally destroyed kitchen sponge later, and I've discovered that you probably shouldn't apply this stuff straight from the nozzle to the model. It has stained the resin black a little bit, but all of the glue is off. Right, let's put a little bit in my palette and try to mix it up instead. Oh, it happened again! The stuff comes out so fast. At least it's contained this time. Using the little stick provided, I mixed it up until it was all the same colour and attached the armour panels I tried the first time, the thumb connection, and used a cocktail stick to dab a little bit on the finger connection points. By the way, another really useful tool I picked up for this project were these Irwin Quick Grip clamps. That's quite hard to say. You can use them one-handed to apply pressure, and they lock automatically, and when you're done you just push this lever and it releases. To be honest, I wasn't a fan of the JB Plastic Weld. I know I need a lot more experience using it, but it became quite gloopy and hard after about 10 minutes. Ideally I'd have made it in smaller batches, but it came out so fast I couldn't really avoid it. Also, for the future, I'll do this in a totally separate disposable cup thing because I've now also ruined my palette. However, if you're looking for a way to make a gloopy portal to hell made of tentacles and entrails, almost set JB Plastic Welds should be your go-to choice. For the rest of the big panels, I switched out to Gorilla Glue. I know how it works and I feel a bit more comfortable using it. Moisture helps this glue cure, so I lightly dampened each surface to be glued with an old paintbrush, added a blob of glue and smeared it around and stuck the bits together. Once both halves were on, I clamped it from both sides to hold it in place and then got to work on the fingers. Because these fingers aren't going to be load bearing, they're not particularly heavy, I'm just using super glue for the sake of my sanity. I glued the partially assembled fingers into position, trying to keep them in a slightly relaxed open hand pose. I also stuck the thumb on, and once I was pretty happy with the finger pose, I glued the fingertips into place, again trying to mimic a sort of natural open hand look. These little finger pistons have to go on next. They slot into the little dimple recesses on the finger sections and slide down into the knuckle holes. This one was a bit longer for the pose I wanted, so I snipped off a bit from the bottom of the piston and glued it on. The final piston needed a tiny bit filed off at the side to sit nice and flush, but yeah, it looks good. I gave it a few hours to make sure all of the glues had dried, and you can see here that the Gorilla Glue had expanded out slightly. It's really hard to see this bit in particular unless you're intentionally looking for it, but it's something to keep in mind for any more precise or detailed bits later. The JB weld has also made some gunky bits here and there, but that was quite easy to cut away with my scalpel once it had dried. This little power generator thing glues onto the back-facing side of the hand, and the cables come down underneath it to attach onto the lower armor panels. And while I waited for that to set, I was feeling pretty happy with this ridiculous Warhammer robot hand that was coming together in front of me, so I took a cheeky snap for the gram, you know, as you do. And good job I did, because Marcus alerted me to the fact that I glued on the thumb tip the wrong way round.
Mr. Galzo says I should get the 200 to break your thumb, you understand?
Okay, not too bad. It took a bit of force to get that off. The JB weld is serious business. I trimmed off the excess black stuff with my scalpel, and just using super glue this time, I put the thumb tip back the right way round. Now let's figure out what I want to do with this wrist assembly. It's articulated enough that you could move it in, out, forwards, backwards, on top of any articulation that the arm on the body actually has. I don't think I really want it flopping in or out too much, so I'm happy to glue that in place, but I think it might be nice to alter the twist of the wrist depending on the pose, and I think it's also a nice excuse to try out the magnets and special drills that I bought for this project. To prep the parts, I cut off the little plug on the wrist section and filed it flat, and then I used my scalpel to make a little pilot hole to keep my drill roughly central. Okay, check out these drill bits. These are called Forstner bits, and are designed to drill flat, circular holes and stuff. And those holes will be filled with these 10mm by 2mm neodymium magnets. Very strong for their size, apparently each one has a 1 kilogram pulling force. So my 10mm drill bit installed, my drill set to its lowest speed and clamped to the desk for stability and safety, I drilled a hole for my magnets in both sections of the wrist. I moistened the parts, added a blob of Gorilla Glue, and pressed 2 magnets into the first hole. This makes sure the magnets are the right way around, attracting each other and not pushing the parts away. I stuck the other section on top and then slid them apart sideways to release them without pulling them out of their holes. I cleaned up the excess glue on the outside and then clamped the parts to make sure that the expanding glue didn't push the magnets out of the holes. And after a couple of hours, we have contact. Almost at the finish line for Power Claw assembly, I Gorilla Glued the wrist socket in position, pretty straight on, and clamped it until it was secure. And then, the ultimate test, will it actually hold the weight of the hand? Yes! Well, sort of. It holds really well if it's just hanging straight down, but you can start to feel the magnet's force struggling when you tilt it forward or backward. I do have bigger magnets, 20mm by 3mm, which have a pulling force of about 3 kilograms each, but maybe once the body's frame is built, I'll know exactly what pose I want the hand in, and I can just glue it permanently in place. We'll see. For now though, that's it. Because of all the prep stages and glue curing time, this whole process actually took a few days. Rather than making dozens of videos just building this thing, what I'll probably end up doing is doing a few video highlights, but mostly assembling the rest of this Titan in hobby hangout style live streams. We've done a couple already and you seem to quite enjoy them. We'll try to vary the times so people watching in different countries can watch in sociable hours, but make sure to subscribe and maybe think about hitting that notification bell so you don't miss future videos or streams. Right then. I haven't actually shown this to Penny yet. Let's see what she thinks.
Yeah, you got that black gungy stuff everywhere, didn't you? Look, it's all dirty.
Yeah, I did wash it off, so hopefully it's just stained and it won't kind of paint with the texture.
I don't think you can feel it.
No.
And you fixed the thumb. Well done. Eagle-eyed Instagram viewers. It's quite big, isn't it? The fingers are a bit stumpy.
I would say it's bigger than your hand.
Yeah, but the fingers are
Volume-wise.
quite short, aren't they? Look.
Stumpy fingers. Would you prefer to have that hand or your hand?
Well, I mean, I quite like my hand, so I'll just stick with mine, I think. Although this does have finger pistons. So I'm quite gel. Where does this bit go?
That goes on the back.
On the back.
Beautiful.
And then you put that magnet in. I mean, it's fairly strong, isn't it? But it's just the tilt. If you tilt, it will come off. A bit too small. Wow, this whole thing's going to be absolutely enormous, isn't it?
Yes.
Great.
This is your life now.
Great. Like that sort of there, and then
It's
maybe higher.
Yeah, it's about its own hand height off the ground.
Oh my god. But the shoulders are like the highest bit, aren't they?
Because
The head's kind of.
the shoulders.
Oh, for goodness sake.
It's 55 inches tall.
Inches.
Sorry, centimeters.
Blimey. That's quite different. Well, I mean, I love it. I'm very proud of you. Well done.
Thanks. Okay, so remember I mentioned that somehow, definitely through no fault of mine, we forgot to order a head for the Titan. Well, Mitch from the awesome YouTube channel Terrainosaur very kindly sent us the super rare beta pattern Warlord Titan head, which you can only get from Warhammer World. Very rare, very fancy, very awesome. We unboxed it in a live stream, and I just donated all of the ad revenue and super chat money from that live stream to Mitch's charity of choice, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which focuses on clinical research for Parkinson's. If you want to help Mitch's fundraiser, that would be a very awesome thing to do, and you can find a link in the video description. Finally, a massive thanks to our supporters on Patreon. I'm still trying to figure out how to do this, but ideally I want the Titan's body to have the names of all of the channel's Patreon supporters as Gothic script on the armor panels. Let's see if I can make that happen. In the meantime, here's a shout out to our newest members. Danger 2007, Guaram, Harrison Benning, Jacob Narvel, William Honeywell, Electric Warlock, Kobe Tasker, Gareth Jones, Electo989.m41, Mark Jolly, Slayer Ginge, Bicky, Brett K and DFW, Charlie Minshaw, Clan O'Neill, David Dryden, Starkiller, River Runner, Natalie Southerden, Zero Honor, Tio Safriti, Uni Walrus, Aaron Gunning, Kaiju Breaker, Dan Galippo, Terry, Anthony Rourke, Wildheart McTavish, Bob the Wonder Horse, Tom Schoenberg, Eris Black, Dan Frost, Dennis Claessens, and Buck Cake Bake. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed seeing me work on my first big Forge World model, and hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. Don't forget to check out the 30-day free trial for Audible, check out the links in the description, tell them I sent you, and I'll love you forever. Bye for now.